Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Agasicles Stamus from Gearworks.com and the E2KG Network podcasting channel here on YouTube, back with another episode of Enough to Keep Going. This is episode number 98 for Thursday, the 13th of June in this year of our gaming 2019. We are back to complete our coverage of E3 2019. Part 1 aired Tuesday night. This will be part 2, wherein which we shall complete the remaining topics: the PC gaming show, Bethesda's press conference, Ubisoft, UBE3, AMD's Next Horizon gaming press conference, the Square Enix show, and the Nintendo Direct. Here with me, again, tonight, the Swiss Guard.
Hello, Gus, please.
DBQ.
I'm kind of ready for E3 to be done.
DBQ hams.
Well, I've got a tooth tonight, gentlemen, so that's good. But I don't know that our energy level is the same as it was on Tuesday. So we'll see how we hold up here as Swiss is fading as the E3 week takes its toll on him.
Good. As we are about to get started, and I am about to introduce the third member, I would just, having listened to the Tuesday night podcast, I would just say maybe tonight we act like we like video games. And Osiris Prime.
Oh, you're going to be sorely disappointed then.
I don't
No,
think
we're going to bring the energy tonight. We'll bring the energy. Good vibes.
Tonight we discussed Nintendo, so of course it's going to be much more positive.
I don't know about
Were
that.
we that negative on Tuesday? I mean, I know personally I am not super thrilled by this year's E3, but I didn't know that we sounded that bad.
You know that I cannot tell a lie, and you know that whenever you ask me a question, I assume that it's an honest question and you're not just looking for a rhetorical response.
No, I'm looking for an honest answer. Like if we sounded that negative, that's
I don't know that we sounded negative. It was just that I would say, if I were taking a metric, our percentage, times that we said that we were interested or buoyed or sparked by something was significantly less than the things that we said we were disappointed in.
Fair enough. Let's see how the ratio plays out tonight.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that that's unfair. Things I would there was nothing that impressed us. And I shouldn't say nothing. There was a very small number of things that impressed us. Overall, we maybe weren't entirely impressed by Stadia. We weren't impressed by many things at the Microsoft press conference, and so on and so forth. So it just makes it hard for the vendors and the manufacturers when we're so difficult to please. So let's get started without further ado. I'll get social media out at some time. We're going to quickly burn through the PC gaming show because it's actually a leftover tidbit from Tuesday night show that we didn't get in. All I wanted to mention were a couple things that caught my eye, because of maybe their creative value or whatever, or just an interesting title that was available. Most of these were things that were dated. Also, I don't think I ran with anything that I felt was worth mentioning if a date wasn't pegged to it. So Mutant Year Zero Seed of Evil drops July 30th, which is impending on Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, PC, and PlayStation 4. I picked that one out because I think we covered the E3 where the first one was announced. It's this really weird title where it's a moose. It's some mixture of three kind of like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, like mutant animals and one human. But it's it could be a 4-player co-op squad based thing. The sequel to that. So amazingly, that game came out. the sequel to it is now being announced. So it's visually striking when it kind of catches your eye. And the fact that it's dropping right around the corner, I thought was interesting. Conan,
can I stay there for just a minute? Because I think it is interesting in terms of the original one just launched in December, right? Yeah. So is this an expansion or is this a sequel?
It's listed as Mutant Year Zero Seed of Evil, so it's hard for me to tell if it's an expansion or a sequel.
I'm looking it up here, and it says Seed of Evil, the new Mutant Year expansion revealed. So that makes more sense. If it's an expansion pack, it's nice to have expansions rather than just DLC.
I guess what makes it weird for me then is it's an expansion on a game that is not super highly critically rated. It's maybe in the mid 70s, maybe. So that they stuck with it for an expansion is good. Show some moxie. Conan Unconquered really caught my eye because it feels like it has kind of a Rise of Nations vibe to it. This one is actually out already. I think it came out 29 May. The other thing that was interesting that caught my eye is the developer is Petroglyph, who are the Star Wars Empire at War guys, my favorite Star Wars game of all time, and exceeds the goofy Age of Empires 2 Star Wars mod, which is more popular, but I never cared for.
They also did Grey Goo, which was a pretty recent RTS game.
Okay.
In a drought of RTSs. So this is it looks like a pretty solid chops for a developer.
Yeah, a title called Moons of Madness, which caught my eye because visually and setup wise, the premise feels and looks a lot like Prey, which is again a game that I am very enamored with. That drops on 31 October on Xbox One, PC, and PS4. Age of Wonders. And I wasn't able to fully pull this apart from the briefing. It's Age of Wonders, but it's Planetfall. And so I can't tell if it's just Age of Wonders sci-fi or if it's actually Age of Wonders and a mix with the Planetfall IP. I don't think it is. But if you don't remember Age of Wonders was one of the very popular series in the early 2000s. And Age of Wonders 3 since it came out, I think in the 2010s. But it is very reminiscent of kind of Heroes of Might and Magic. But it's graphically, it was always, in my opinion, a more artistic and striking graphics palette than Heroes of Might and Magic was. And it wasn't like the gristmill that Heroes of Might and Magic was with constantly churning out sequels. So it was very interesting to see that series come back to light, and this time with the sci-fi coat of paint on it. Remnants from the Ashes drops August 20th. This one caught my eye because it was in the PC gaming show that I finally realized that this is a multiplayer co-op, squad-based games as a service, leveling, character progression kind of game that just got mostly like cinematic trailers in some of the console shows, but there was a bit more of gameplay shown in the PC gaming show. And so this one has the potential, as all of these kind of looter shooters do, to be a big deal when it finally comes out. It's interesting that it comes out right at that beginning of going back to school kind of season, which means it could become a college dorm favorite and therefore gain some popularity in that space. Per Aspera comes out in 2020. This is a Mars world-building terraforming strategy game. So it's from an indie developer and has a pretty striking graphical style to it. Ancestors: The Humankind Odyssey is from, I didn't catch his full name and I didn't go back to watch the show again to write it down, but this is from, the guy's first name is Patrice. He was formerly at Ubisoft, was part, I believe, of the Assassin's Creed development team. We have seen him on stage in past E3s for Ubisoft. He has since left the company. I think he was one of these people who we heard about leaving the company because creatively he just wanted to get away and do something of his own, was kind of caught up in the Assassin's Creed gristmill of pumping out annual releases. He has a new game that is coming out August 27th that, again, kind of goes back, as we're going to talk about one of the Ubisoft games that is going back and taking a look at mythology separate from the austere historic lens of Assassin's Creed. This is going back and looking at human history still, but goes all the way back to the dawn of mankind. And so it actually starts with, this may hit some people who aren't fans of the theory of evolution, but it goes back to, the first, I guess, Neanderthal or Paleo. I don't keep them straight anymore. But the first evolutionary step from simians to upright walking mammals. So men, males, humans, whatever you want to call it. And tells that in a story. So I thought that was just pretty creatively interesting. Borderlands 3, did we already have the drop date for Borderlands 3 before the PC gaming show? The release date? Okay.
Yeah, because it's been up on the Epic Store for pre-order.
Okay.
So, yep.
So just confirmed to be September 13th, 2019. Maneater, which again, we, in the course of doing E3s on this podcast, saw this game last year. This is a shark RPG, which just cracks me up every time I see it, that somebody is making this. It is further along in development and is now slated to come out sometime in 2020. That dev team would still not commit to a firm day and date release date. But I want to say they were maybe hinting at spring or first half of 2020. They may not have actually said that, so I don't want to put words in their mouth. Swiss, you caught a game called El Hijo, which I think I caught, but it didn't make my list of something that sparked my interest. You want to cover that really quick?
Yeah, it's like a cartoony, like Old West game. They describe it basically inspired from like Sergio Leone's westerns, and I like that whole style. Clint Eastwood, A Few Dollars More, like Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So, but it's the story looked interesting to me. You're a little boy, and I guess your mom leaves you at a monastery to protect you, and you want to try to escape the monastery so you can go back and find your mom. And it's kind of a stealth puzzle game. So it very much struck me the scene in Ocarina of Time when you're sneaking into the castle to meet Princess Zelda for the first time as Child Link, like that style, stealth puzzly type thing. So it looked kind of cute, and that was like one game that I put on my internal wish list spreadsheet. And the other thing is I saw it at the PC show, but it looks like it's coming out for all platforms. For PC, it'll be on Steam, but it looks like, quite frankly, the perfect Switch game, and that's probably where I'm going to pick it up.
Very cool. And again, one of the major reasons I watch the PC gaming show still is that a lot of times the games get shown, as I mentioned in the rundown here, that are advertised. They're not just coming to PC, but they're coming to console, but didn't show up at the console game show, and they don't have a major publisher, so they're not at their show. So the only place you become aware of them is in the PC game show. And then also they drop a lot of release dates, which we don't always get at the other shows. So on to Bethesda. Yes, thank you, DB. Patrice Desailly was the creative director that we were talking about with the game Ancestors: The Humankind Odyssey. I'm amazed that that nobody knew anything about that game, and as good as it looks it's coming out right around the corner here at the end of the summer. Bethesda. This was one of the shows that I think a lot of us were interested to see, just in terms of how were they going to approach it. So they opened up the show as Bethesda often does. Bethesda often takes a human angle at their E3 presentation. This time, the angle that they took, and I thought it was a particularly neat and an effectively neutralizing position to take. They basically pitched this whole concept that players and fans of Bethesda games are part of the Bethesda team, and that they are almost like employees of the company. There was a lot of talk of, those players and fans and customers sticking with Bethesda, that the whole reason that they make games is for them. All of this, in my opinion, was a big setup to how they were going to handle the bad news that was Fallout 76. So that was the setup. I thought it was also interesting in the trailer that there was a lot of... So after they did these human pieces, they then popped to a trailer reel, a very snappy, quick cut images and quick video clips of games. There were a lot of games from Arcane Studios. There was a lot of Dishonored 2, and Prey. I felt it was indicative of them leading up to an announcement of a new game coming from Arcane. Pete Hines, the VP of Marketing, was the first one on the stage. He went through a few things. One of the things that caught my interest was that he hit this point where he talked about his history at Bethesda and how he had been there for 20 years, having got his start as like a community manager who was like a mod in a forum. And he kind of got a little emotionally choked up as he tried to, talk through how long he had been there and how much it meant to him being a Bethesda employee. Todd Howard was then next on the stage, and this is the part that I was kind of interested to see how Todd, who had been the main talking head at last year's show, would handle it. He got a partial standing O. He did crack a joke about being impressed that there were still people there at the Bethesda BE3 show for this year's E3, giving a nod to the notion that that fans would have abandoned them in the wake of Fallout 76, and really the only way he directly addressed it. He said we got a lot of well-deserved criticism. And then the other part that he went on made to me seemed like he was saying, but we stuck together and got through it. And again, it was the statement that I felt was poised to make everyone in the crowd who was a Bethesda fan as if they were part of the sacred trust. They were inside the inner circle of people who had believed in Fallout 76 and stuck with it, rather than saying, hey, we screwed this up, we should do better and you guys deserve better and we're right, which was more so the EA approach when they had the Battlefront 2 problems. DICE came out on that stage last year and said, we screwed this up, we should have known better, but we believe in the game and we're working hard at it and we're going to give back to the fans the things that they deserve. This year it was more like, it was a hard time, but you guys were part of the team and that allowed us to keep working at it and push through, which is just a slightly different take. Any thoughts and opinions on that stuff from the opening from you guys?
Yeah, I'll just say I think the way you present it, the way they spun it, is probably one of the more kind of constructive ways they could have tried to go about this, right? I think the mea culpa, deep bow that Nintendo did with the 3DS or that DICE did, as you said, I think it would have acknowledged it, but it would have kind of dwelt in it. Where this acknowledges it in a way that says we're kind of trying to move through it. And whether or not how much of this is, hindsight 2020 and retroactively trying to bring people into this process. But from a PR perspective, I think they messaged it as constructively as possible. And the fact that they could then come out and give some announcements about Fallout 76 in terms of some of its new modes and NPCs and other things that I think in some ways they set it up for people who have had tangential interest to at least take another glance back at it, or those that have stuck with it to have a reason to stick around.
Anything else, Prime, DB, Swiss? Nope.
No, I didn't get to see the beginning, and I didn't get to go back and actually look at it, so I don't want to comment on something I hadn't seen. So
okay. So they then went on and talked about one of their talked about Elder Scrolls Blades, which is a mobile game. Having watched, I think, all of the press conferences, even Microsoft's, the reception from most crowds about mobile games was very tepid. It didn't get outright caustic, but literally in the Microsoft Stadium, after tons of claps and applause after like every single thing that was said, when they showed the Gears Pop demo and you realize it was a mobile game, there was complete dead silence in that conference. And I was like, wow. And then there were other mobile games that were shown during the conference that just people didn't react to, or there were like quiet claps. Bethesda, to me, was the only publisher, and I don't know how they do it, but presented a mobile game and like people clapped like it was a new Elder Scrolls coming out. So that's the point in the conference for me where I kind of was like, this feels like a reality. This feels like an Apple press conference, like a reality distortion bubble. And it can be looked at positively. I mean, it says something about the loyalty that Bethesda incites within its fans. Obviously, as I've mentioned, over the months and years, I get concerned when I feel like they don't get held as accountable for things. But they have a rabid fan following, and being a Bethesda fan, a player of Bethesda games, seems to be more than just a simple commercial relationship for a lot of people. And
that's probably why they went with the strategy, that they did to open it up.
Yep, absolutely. So on that topic, Elder Scrolls Blades got an update, which was available the night of the press conference. It is also now coming to Nintendo Switch. Prime, who is a card-carrying member of the Pets movement. I am as well. It's just that I don't necessarily want to play everything that comes to Switch, but I do want everything to eventually wind up on Switch. Allows for crossplay, which I thought was very impressive. So in progression, so that your character saves show up on the other platform, and both versions of those games were playable at the Bethesda booths. Then we went on to the big meat on the bone, as Swiss would say, and they started talking about Fallout 76. Wastelanders is the new update. And it's thematically about kind of rebuilding the world. So you having been, I guess, successful in Fallout 76, that incentivizes other humans to return to the area. This is kind of their story engineered way to explain the reason for there not being a lot of human NPCs in the initial game rollout. Now there are. They're repopulating the area of West Virginia. There's a full quest line. There are full dialogue trees. I was a little surprised again in the reality distortion bubble. I'm like, people look at that as an update. If something is called a role-playing game, doesn't it normally have quest lines and dialogue trees? But whatever. It is free for all owners of the game. There is a trial going on right now that started on June 10th and goes through the 17th for people who had not bought the game yet. I thought one of the things that was really interesting was that there was a new, I was very interested in the mythology standpoint, that there is a new game mode, which is a story point that pivots around the notion of taking control of a Vault 51. To add on to the mythology that there is this other vault that was abandoned and that nobody had gone into, but I guess had since become populated but was leaderless. And then that intro ran into a product piece that was a reveal that they have implemented a 52-player battle royale mode in Fallout 76. Prime, does that pique your interest?
Yeah, a little bit. When I first saw it, unfortunately, once again, I didn't get to go back and see. Like, I don't know if they showed anything. Like, I had like a teaser trailer or like how it's gonna work, or I mean, obviously it's a battle royale game, but I never thought like the gunplay and the shooting and stuff was like great in the Fallout series. So I don't know how that's gonna work. I don't know how refined it's gonna be. Maybe they've been toiling away at it, but we'll have to see.
Right. So this was the point in the conference that for me was a big eye roll. So maybe it's my turn to be negative tonight. I was like, great, just what we need. But it's an interesting choice that they made. Go ahead, Swiss.
On the plus side, at least it's a mode and not a standalone game.
Yes. That is also a free edition. There is and it's part of the free trial that's going on this week. Todd Howard was very specific to mention that at that point, everything that they talked about for Fallout 76 that is coming in 2019 is free, which I guess is another good strategic move as a payback to people who stuck with the game. Any other comments on Fallout 76? Okay, then the thing that really hooked my interest was the introduction of Ghostwire Tokyo. This is an action-adventure game revolving around the notion of a supernatural enemy. It has lots of different shades of games that, again, it reminds me of elements of Prey, System Shock, Splinter Cell in some ways, in terms of the stealth action parts of it, Deus Ex in some ways. And again, this was the game that was talked a lot, or introduced, or the talk through was by Akumi Nakamura, who is the female creative director on the game. The game engine to me looks pretty amazing, and like I mentioned, evokes memories and thoughts of Dishonored in terms of its design approach. It is probably the game that I found most interesting and most enticing out of the entire conference. Swiss, did you have some other things you wanted to mention about it?
No, it was one of the handful of games, though, coming out of the Bethesda conference that made it onto my wish list spreadsheet.
Cool. Anybody just get? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, for a lot of the reasons you said, just the atmosphere, and it just looked like a really different, interesting game. So it's pretty exciting.
Okay. Anybody else want to weigh in? Prime.
Yeah, I just want to say, yeah, this is where I actually started watching the conference, and yeah, this really, I didn't realize at the time it was from the team who did Dishonored.
Well, it's
not Dishonored. I'm sorry.
The Evil Within.
Evil Within.
Yeah. So at first I thought, I was like, when I read that later on, I was like, oh, so it's gonna be a horror game, but then it's an action adventure game. So it looked really cool. I mean, even though it was kind of just CGI, in-game footage, but still it piqued my interest.
Yeah, it's a stealth action adventure game that combines techno ninjas with ghosts. I'm like, I can get behind that premise with no problem. DBQ, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, again, I think the fact that it's a new IP, that it's a new, even if it feels like another game, the fact that we're not getting X sequel made it stand out to me. This and some of the other games that were new IPs out of each conference really stood out to me.
And probably a next-gen game, more than likely, since it was only a CG trailer and no release date or anything like that. I'm assuming.
So a thing that's very difficult for me to get my head wrapped around, we can go ahead and pop that acorn right now, is I don't have a strong feeling that we're getting signals from the industry that people have dev kits. Like that's usually a thing that comes out, and what we really start hearing from is we start getting these pieces from developer studios that start talking to the press about, oh yeah, this thing is easy to develop for, this thing is hard to develop for. We haven't heard a word, and it's hard for me to believe that in console generation 9 that Sony and Microsoft have figured out some magic spell to get the devs to keep their mouths shut. Like I don't believe that. So it's just weird to me. I mean, clearly, and even Sony hasn't said that they've converted all of their internal studios over to full-time next-gen development. I mean, Microsoft has at least made indications that that's what they're doing. I mean, announcing Scarlet, Turn 10 not being at E3 this year, and then firmly saying that their backwards compatibility team is now done with Xbox One development and is being converted over entirely to Scarlet. It just makes for a weird transition that is unlike what we've seen before. So me personally, I'm not, given that, well, I'm not me, but you guys, given that you guys were wrong a lot about games that you said were going next gen, I'm not willing to put any poker chips on that pile right now. It would not surprise me that game comes out and is on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was kind of a surprise, obviously, because I for sure thought Cyberpunk was going to be next gen, but obviously that's coming out for Xbox One. And we've obviously heard other games that we're going to be next gen for sure, from Bethesda, Starfield, and the next Elder Scrolls. And they are known for saying, "Hey, here's a game," and then we get it like 4, 5, 6 months later. So I mean, it's possible that it'll still be on this generation. So I mean, I guess with Bethesda at least, we don't really know.
Right. One game that we can be certain is not going to be on Xbox One, 2, or PlayStation 5 is Commander Keen, which is a free-to-play multiplayer mobile game. Cartoony appearance, but not for kids in its content. Coming out for iOS and Android. I guess based on an old id Software game from the early 90s. I'm familiar with the name, but just never dipped my toes in it. DBQ?
Yeah, so this used to be like shareware. I mean, you would get this in like your shareware floppy disks, and it was a side scroller, kind of clunky platformer. I've got some memories of it, certainly. But I think because of that, I think that's why you said the cartoony aspect, only on mobile, not necessarily for kids, because there's no brand awareness of it. I think it's really people of a certain generation that have at least awareness of the name, that when something pops up on their phone in their mobile app store, that they're probably more inclined to give it a look versus if this was some type of console release. So I was surprised at it because this was one of those few id properties that they hadn't done anything with, and they didn't reboot it in some kind of dark graphic future. So it is just kind of in its cartoony neon kind of colors that it was back in the early 90s.
Yeah, and I said specifically not for kids because of the F-bombs that were dropped in the trailer. So parents, be aware. Again, one of the more interesting things that I felt coming out of Bethesda's conference was Rage 2 and how it's being addressed. I thought, based on the original Rage, that this was predominantly a single-player, story-driven, first-person shooter. They are coming out with an expansion called Rise of Ghosts, and they are talking about it as being a games as a service kind of game. So there are going to be continuing content drops. They're dropping a new gameplay mode with this, additional vehicles, a pilotable mech. So they will actually beat Borderlands 3 to the punch with a pilotable mech in a game this year. Cheat codes, which I thought was an interesting callback, and additional new stuff, which they didn't specify, but they said is coming. So did this surprise anyone else?
So I had heard the messaging around it before it released that it was going to be in this kind of games as service, that they were going to be populating the world as they went. And then I never really heard anything further about that. So I was pleased to see that they hadn't abandoned it. And the fact that it looks like there's a lot more stuff coming for it means that some type of sale collection coming this holiday season is going to be a pretty meaty package versus what was relatively thin. Again, back to that kind of industry concern that we've voiced multiple times, right? They launched this relatively thin and are developing it over the course of its first year.
Yeah, but one way to get ahead of that story is to not tell anybody that it's a games as a service game, right? Until you have the first games as a service content ready. Very, very interesting ambush for Bethesda. Seems like there was a lot of that in their messaging this E3. Wolfenstein Cyberpilot in VR arriving this July, playable at E3. I did not catch what platforms it is coming to.
It's PSVR, Oculus, and maybe Vive, but I know those two
Great.
for sure.
Great. I mean, if it's going on Steam, it's going to wind up on Vive. So all very positive. I look forward to playing a Wolfenstein game as a mech in VR. That was pretty amazing. Prime, were you going to mention something else on that as well?
No, I just had a quick thing for Rage 2, actually, if I can go back.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
I guess I am a little confused on this game because I really didn't, kind of like you, obviously I saw the first game. It was single player. Is there multiplayer in this game, or is this game as a service just content wise? They're just going to keep throwing stuff out there for single player stuff. I don't know if anybody's played it.
I don't know, DBQ, I think you know better than I do. Is there PvP in this game?
Or any co-op or something, or any kind of
not that I'm aware of. Now I gotta look it up. But no, I think it was supposed to be more like kind of keep dropping in missions.
Okay. That's another interesting take. And Prime, I apologize. I gave DBQ, I think, credit for telling me Patrice Desaillet's last name. It was actually you. I do apologize for that.
That's right.
We're
interchangeable.
Wolfenstein Youngblood, maybe things that we knew or maybe just things that were reiterated. Does have co-op, takes place 2 decades after New Colossus, drops July 26th on PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC, and it was playable at E3. Before I turn it over to Eustace, I just want to mention, so thematically, what I feel like is we made some ado about the fact that there weren't a lot of games coming out in the fall holiday season post, Madden 2 through December. But there's a heck of a lot of games coming out right now and over the summer. And then there's a bit of what seems a draw. Sometimes we get this wrong. One of the things we lost in not rigorously going through this thing line by line this year is we don't have metrics. And the whole reason we did metrics last year was because in years past, we had things like this where we subjectively feel like there's not a lot coming out in the fall, but the reality might be if you actually had the analytics, there might actually be a lot of stuff coming out in the fall, or there might be as much stuff coming out in the holiday season as there is in the summer and March 2020. We're not certain, but I will concur that it feels like there's not a lot coming out in holiday season. But definitely at this point in the press conference, I was like, oh, wait, but there's a ton of stuff coming out in June, July, and August that would definitely fill up people's, gameplay coffers until next spring. But Swiss, you wanted to say something specific about Youngblood?
First, I agree with you that like the July, August, September timeframe, I think is pretty dense, surprisingly. But yeah, I don't remember why I picked up Wolfenstein: The New Colossus, why it tickled my fancy at the time, but I got it at launch on PS4 and I really liked it. I think last year they teased Youngblood, I want to say, at the E3 conference, but for whatever reason, my recollection was it was just going to be some DLC add-on to the New Colossus. I didn't, for whatever, my perception may have been wrong or I may be misremembering, but I didn't realize it was a full-blown sequel. So,
and I think that there's been a lot of gamesmanship that goes on with this, and maybe fairly so. My gut tells me that this is a thing like the Uncharted expansion, but not expansion thing that was bigger than an expansion, but not a 40-hour, right, single, first-person shooter. So this is probably somewhere in the 16 to 22-ish hour range, maybe 16 to 20. And I think I don't think that they're defined. I think they're doing the same thing that Naughty Dog did, where they're not defining it, hyper specifically, in order for it to ride that line.
go ahead.
I was gonna say I kind of thought it was more like Ubisoft does, like the Far Cry's. They got Far Cry 4, and then they had Primal, I think, or it was Far Cry 3, and then Primal. And they kind of switch like that. They kind of make a sort of a sequel, but it's not really, and then they kind of build on that. Just like what was the newest Far Cry? That was kind of the future of
New Dawn. And you're absolutely right. It's very much like a Far Cry New Dawn is kind of, in software world, we would probably try and get away with calling this Far Cry 5.5, right? Where, go ahead, DBQ.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, this is exactly what they did in 2015 with the Old Blood, right? They took Wolfenstein: The New Blood, and then a year later or 2 years later, they put out this smaller, it stood alone, but it was definitely based on that engine. So it fits the same model with Youngblood.
Right, and again, most exciting thing about it, it's part of the pets movement, right? So port everything to Switch. So
the big thing for me though was the fact that it's co-op, and then I read some gameplay impressions today, and it sounds like they're changing. The writer made it sound like they got some like looter shooter MMO DNA mixed into it, which I think actually dampens my enthusiasm a little bit. But the co-op aspect is intriguing. And FYI, like as you mentioned, it's coming out next month, July 26th. All the new NVIDIA cards right now are shipping with a free copy of Youngblood, the RTX line.
So you mean their current cards?
Yeah, like you go to NVIDIA's website, and I guess you'll get a key or whatever.
Okay.
But that's their current.
Which is weird. I don't think Youngblood is a game that's been identified as having ray tracing. Maybe it does, and I just missed it.
Maybe it's just a hotness thing for now. And
Yeah.
I agree. It would make sense if that was why they were doing it.
Right.
But I haven't heard that either. But it is the current game that NVIDIA RTX is going with.
Cool. Good deal. Arcane Studios then finally got their time on stage. There are also a lot of that studio in the human pieces that I guess at this point in the conference there were two. Their new game is Deathloop, where there's not a ton to describe about this. It's very much like, I've heard some people talk about it as being, what was the Tom Cruise, Tom Cruise?
Edge of Tomorrow?
Yes. So they talked about it being a lot like that. To me, it seems like the storyline is a bit more like, and this is again another movie title that I'm gonna drop. There's a new Will Smith movie coming out where like he's sent back in time to stop himself or something like that.
Gemini Man?
Yes. So it feels a little bit kind of sort of like that, where there's a time loop mechanic to it. It's kind of pretty much all we know. But it's, to me, that's sufficient. It's Arcane Studios. It's the makers of Prey. and Dishonored doing a new IP under Bethesda. So generally positive things happen from that studio. So Prime and Swiss, either one of you had something to add to that?
Yeah, this is the one I was thinking of. That was from the Dishonored team. But yeah, I mean, for what we saw, which was just like a CG trailer, in-game, graphic trailer. I mean, on paper, it looks kind of cool. Like you're an assassin. I read a little bit more up on it. I had an article here where you're assassin on this island, and you're doing hits on people other than just those two. But if something happens and you die, you come back obviously. So it looks like it might be cool, or it could be. So I mean, Dishonored team, yeah, I mean, it should be fairly good. Hopefully, fairly good. So Swiss.
That was basically what I was going to say. It looks like it could be cool. The premise was intriguing, and the trailer was a well done piece of advertising for the game. So
it piqued my interest.
So yeah, I mean, the one thing that I think can be said for Arcane Studios is, they in Dishonored and Prey, both of those games implement kind of innovative game mechanics or approaches to their storytelling, and their setting and their world building, and neither of those were misses. So those guys seem to always bring something that is differentiated from the other content that is typical around the industry at the time. And whereas a lot of teams try to bring something that stands alone and is distinctive, a lot of teams do that and it's not good, right? We talk about, I can see what they were trying to do here, but it's like not fun. And I've found that with that team that doesn't tend to be the case, that everything that they do is very insightful, and not necessarily groundbreaking, but definitely a variation on the theme. So last two things. Then Bethesda talked very briefly about Orion, which is their streaming tech. Currently, you can use it to play Doom 2016. You go and register for something called the Slayers Club, and you can try, for now, I think it's a limited time demo. You can try the technology for free, and it allows you to stream at least to a phone. I wasn't entirely clear on what other devices you could play it on. Swiss?
I was just kind of a little confused about it, mostly because if it's streaming tech and then they're pitching it like, it's built right into the engine, which makes it more efficient, that makes me think it's not like consumer level technology. My thoughts were like, this is something that a publisher or a developer would want to integrate with their game. I mean, that's not how they're pitching it, but that's how I would have thought it would have been used. And then my next thought was like, if it's for developers, why aren't they pitching this at GDC? Why is it like on the E3 stage? So I'm curious how it could work. Like on the one hand, they pitched it like, hey, if you have Orion, all your stuff will work better. But it's like, does that mean like I can plug it in with Stadia? And how is that supposed to, how is me having Orion supposed to improve my Stadia stream? So there's just still a lot of questions for me with this.
What it felt like to me was, again, given my epiphany during this conference about how rabid the Bethesda fan base is, they are certainly a publisher that is poised, having rolled out their desktop client last year with Fallout 76. They're certainly a publisher that is poised to roll out a subscription service. And again, it seems like there's a large population of like Bethesda loyalists where there's a group of people, there's a demographic. Again, I didn't realize this stuff before. There's a demographic of people who play Bethesda games. At least they're RPGs. And those people are a ripe demo for rolling out a subscription service because they're going to sign up for it and pay every month. So Orion could be something that would go along with that to allow those people to play those subscribed to games on mobile platforms. Prime, you were going to mention something?
Yeah, so I was like Swiss and maybe all of us kind of confused at first, like what this was. I thought it was just okay. So there's another Stadia, another xCloud. So then I was looking into it a little bit more, and I found an article on The Verge where they were talking about it, and it does lie within you can use it in a game engine or on top of another streaming service. Okay, I guess that's cool. But then there's talking about how when they do the test this coming, I think it's in the fall or end of summer, it's going to run independent of those services. So it's going to be its own thing somehow, I guess. So it's still kind of confusing, but I mean, I guess. And then they're talking about how it could potentially cut down the requirements of the bandwidth you need to to use these services like Stadia or say xCloud or something like that. And it's like, how is it going to do that? Or I mean, I guess it could just be like a graphics engine where they can lease it out or rent it out, whatever you want to call it, to these other services, and they can try to use it. But I mean, you'd figure these services would have that already, maybe. I don't know.
So I applaud you guys in your dedication in trying to figure this out. I will tell you, for me personally, there's too many offerings and too many things going on. I have zero time to give a flark for a company that can't define and describe and convey to me their streaming service. Like, I've got Stadia and Project xCloud. I have to figure those out as it is. You giving me a flash in the pan one-liner in a press conference, like, that's not going to get my attention. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Swiss.
Also, I was going to say, like, my last comment on it is it struck me very much like, those commercials on TV for various super medications where they're like, oh, go talk to your doctor about it. It's like, go talk to your publisher about implementing Orion in your next, MMO or whatever.
Yeah.
They rattle off like 50 side effects from it,
right.
2 seconds.
and I don't mean that to say I'm not interested in you guys talking about it. I'm just saying that was it. It came up. It caught my eye for a split second, and then I'm like, when you can explain this to the extent that the other guys can, then I'll pay attention to it. Doom Eternal, playable at E3, drops November 22nd. Here's one of those critical fall games that we felt don't exist. It comes out in a collector's edition with an actual helmet. That's a punch. And I guess was Bungie still doing the Halo when they did the Master Chief helmet that you couldn't wear? That was very big, but just a skosh too small to actually put on a head.
It was the cat helmet, right?
Yeah. That was 3, I think, right?
Yeah, it was 3.
Okay.
Yep. It could also be a punch at. Didn't one of the Fallouts come with a? No, that was a Pit Boy. That's different. Yep. Anyhow, keep going. We got to move into Ubisoft. I got some dancing pandas.
has multiplayer, a battle mode that is gonna be in a demo, I think, later this year. The battle mode is 2v1. So this is very interesting because every effort at pulling off something like this has failed in recent history. But it is where 2 players get to play demons and 1 person gets to play the Slayer. So it is the numbers of the demons versus all of the special moves and things that the Slayer, which is now what they call the Colonial Marine, who has typically been the hero in Doom.
Guy, as everybody says.
The Doom guy, right? So that's going to be there. They will have more about that multiplayer mode at QuakeCon, which is being either subtitled or a piece of QuakeCon is now being referred to as DoomCon, which is fine. But yeah, that's what we have about Doom 2. As I mentioned that, and I talked about, how our impression could be skewed about the holiday, I will say one thing I'm now in the hunt for as we go through the rest of the show is I'm trying to remember, and now I'm going to look as we talk about Ubisoft, Square, and Nintendo, if there's an 800-pound gorilla in the holiday season that everybody tried to run away from, and that might be part of the reason for the vacuum, kind of like everybody tried to steer clear of Red Dead Redemption 2 last fall. So help me out by being on the lookout for that. DBQ, you were interested in Watchdog Legions, and I demand that you tell us why, sir.
Well, I think that the snarky answer is it was the first time I think I saw gameplay on in a press conference rather than a pre-rendered cutscene. That's not true. Bethesda had some as well, but
a crap ton of gameplay while we're at it. That was a very long gameplay sequence to open up the Ubisoft conference.
Yes, right. I think, and the concept of it there is, that anybody can be recruited. Everybody has, that anybody can be recruited, and each person that you recruit has a different configuration of skills or abilities, things like that. And listening to a couple other podcasts and reading more about it, I think the interesting thing from a design perspective is that not that they've coded everybody to be, that it's almost procedurally generating as you as you hack somebody, you recruit somebody, it's pulling down what their skill set will be. And so it is, there is a bucket of skill sets and a universe of people, and every time you tap into that universe, it grabs something out of the bucket. And so it does not have to program for everybody, which I think, is interesting. I'm really curious to see how that all plays out. Ubi has. Go ahead.
I can tell you one way it plays out is that you always have to be connected and online, just like you have to be with the Division 2. So that's a bit of a disappointment, but
Yeah, that's probably very true. Yep. So that's my interest there, is that the idea behind it, I think, has the potential to be really successful. And as we've talked about on various podcasts, Ubi really has the open world quest chain kind of gameplay loop perfected, or at least nailed down to a point where if you like them, chances are you're going to like the next one too.
Right, and this is a great example of where, now having achieved that, they can now use that to muscle the market, right? Now that you have that foundational presentation framework established, now you can go do something that is aggressively innovative. Like, there is not going to be another open world action adventure game that does what this game does. If it does it successfully, it is a competitive threat to the rest of the market, who's still trying to figure out in some ways how to put this kind of a thing together. Prime, did you have other notes you wanted to mention about Watch Dogs Legion?
Yeah, just a couple things. I think this is one of the few games that wasn't leaked out from Ubisoft. I think we kind of knew about it.
This one was absolutely leaked, and in fact leaked to the point where Ubisoft then had to come out and officially confirm it before E3.
Oh, was it before E3? Okay, yeah. I thought this was one that. Okay, I guess I had missed that part. Because I knew there's always rumors about it. And then obviously, I guess it did leak. All right, I guess I missed that during the rush and stuff of E3 and just what's going on with everything. But I guess my other thing is, and just kind of piggyback onto what what DB was saying. I guess my only worry here is the way they're going to do. He kind of explained it, how obviously it's not, it's not programming for everybody, but I'm assuming when you're in these missions, I'm assuming is what you're going to get at some point. Are you going to have to sit there and like search for certain people, or are you just you can just pick anybody at random? Like, it doesn't really matter. Like, maybe it'll be harder if you pick in, some dude who just flips burgers, compared to, like, say, a crane operator who who just happens to be able to do a crane over a building that you need to get into or something.
I got the sense that it's kind of a mixture of both. Like, I got the sense that part of that RPG element is that you may know of missions or mission types that you're eventually going to have to go after. You could have a mission type that says you can't do this yet until you get some type of specialist X, and that part of the meta game is going to be the constant hunt, as it kind of is a little bit in the real world, that constant hunt for a particular talent or a particular skill set that you need to add to your team.
I'm just afraid that you're gonna, I don't want to be sitting there, looking for 3 hours for, a certain skill or.
I don't. Again, and I'm guessing. I get the feeling you don't have to. I get the feeling that won't be something that you have to do unless you choose to. Right. And there will be people who are like, tonight I'm going to hunt for my hacker, right? Or tonight I'm going to hunt for my bomb specialist. And that'll be a thing that you do. That's just my guess. Now,
I would say in Ubisoft's kind of pattern that you're going to end up with a skill, or there's going to be some type of way where you're going to have those people marked, or you get like a proximity that there's a rumor of somebody being within this zone, right? So they do a good job of ramping that up without having people have to kind of struggle for it. So I could see there's design aspects where they could guide you to those.
Right. Then the only thing that could potentially happen is if there is that one specific mission that you need that specific skill set, and just by happen chance you have not recruited that for your team, and so you're stuck from progressing past a storyline mission until you get that. Go ahead, Prem.
I was just gonna say, I'm hoping that you would still be able to do it with like anybody if you picked anybody, but obviously it's going to be easier if you have that particular skill or something close to it or something like that. So hopefully, like I said, this is obviously we don't know, so we'll just have to find out.
I found this game interesting because it gives the notion of a couple things, of like assembling my own like Ocean's 11 or like my Italian Job crew, and that team having a personality. The notion that that agents within your team have permadeath, so you could take a person out, they could die, and then they're gone, and that again becomes, as we've talked about before, some of this where we fill in the blanks, right, in our own imagination of a storyline, that could become part of that storyline. Potentially being able to play it on different platforms might then allow you to have, multiple instances of teams where you have one campaign somewhere and another campaign somewhere else, and you could be running a completely different team. I find that interesting. So pretty excited to see this. This drops March 6th, 2020. This is a game that now to me makes that spring pile up seem too far away. There's a thing in there that I actually want like right now. Ubisoft also talked about a TV show from the creators of Always Sunny in Philadelphia, starring Abed from Community, who's a favorite of mine. They did not mention when it comes out, but it's coming to Apple TV. So I know I won't watch it because I'm not paying Apple for a subscription service. But I just thought it was interesting as Ubisoft gets into other content creation avenues. Rainbow Six is heading into its 13th season. Then DBQ, this little, small, kind of almost indie-ish, cartoony presentation style. Smash
Brawlhalla.
Brothers. Okay.
Yeah, it's Brawlhalla. So it's free to play. It's been out for a while. It's on all platforms. It's on Switch as well, PC. It is. They've brought in a variety of. They had Hellboy Hellboy on there. They've brought in characters throughout time. It's kind of hand-drawn animation look. It plays pretty well. I think, and their announcement here was the Adventure Time crew being part of it. If you're not a Switch owner, which is nobody on this podcast, but if you're not a Switch owner, Brawlhalla is a really solid Smash type of game. Good stable online code, good community, a lot of characters. So that was the piece I didn't know that Ubi actually published it, and it's fun to see them continue to kind of support that.
Okay, Ghost Recon drops October 4th, 2020. So this is another of the mythological beasts that we call holiday releases in 2019 that we felt didn't exist. This is one. There's a beta on September 5th. And obviously this will include free updates and new content. Free updates, new content, but there is a season pass involved with it. So I don't really know how any of the updates or new content are separated from that. So I don't know. I signed up to hopefully get into the beta and for the Delta Squad Club or thing or whatever. So we'll see how that goes. Then probably the thing that excited me the most from the entire press conference is the notion of Rainbow Six Quarantine, which comes out in early 2020, which is a 3-player tactical co-op continuation of the Rainbow Six story kind of sort of oriented content piece that gets away from the PvP aspect. It is use of the Rainbow Six license, obviously, to further the property outside of the money train that is already Rainbow Six Siege. Obviously another instance of the increasing population of 3-player oriented games, whether they be co-op or PvP, that are invading the games industry. I was super excited about this, but it appears that none of you were. So we'll move on to the Division 2. Tons of stuff coming out for the Division 2. Next episode 1, comes out in July. Takes you outside of the city onto an attack on National Zoo, a mission at Kenley College. Episode 2 then comes out this fall. It takes you to the Pentagon, which I thought was very interesting as far as a set piece goes. Then is when you will get the second raid. Episode 3 then comes out in early 2020 and takes you back to New York. One of the things that I thought was interesting from a personnel and developer alignment, which I don't understand, is Ubisoft Massive, I thought were the guys behind the Division 2, but the guy who was out on stage for the press conference is a guy from Red Storm, which was Tom Clancy's owned studio before they joined Ubisoft.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was a little strange.
I think in Red Storm pops up like when you launch the Division 2, you get a handful of named studios, and Red Storm is one of them. So yeah, I think Massive is where it originated. But then given the scope of this game, they've done the Ubisoft aspect of bringing people in, but I really like the fact that they've brought them in and given them some attribution, giving them some credit for it along the way.
Yeah, something has gone on with Red Storm where they seem to never be the lead studio on anything, and I don't know what that's really about. It's a little disappointing because again, I grew up with those guys being the guys who were the studio behind all the Rainbow Six titles and the initial Ghost Recon titles, and then when they were bought by Ubisoft, at some point they lost that control, and I don't know why. And we're then getting a Division movie on Netflix starring Jessica Chastain and Jake Gyllenhaal. Prime was going to mention something about that, but we'll give him a chance when he comes back. Then the Ubisoft subscription service was announced. Uplay Plus grants you early access to new games, including premium editions with all of their content. So you have to figure that into the math. $15 a month. I guess they're saying it. My notes might be jumbled. I think they're saying the service rolls out in September, and then will be available via Stadia when Stadia Base and all of the Stadia offerings, not just the Founders Edition early access people, go live in 2020. So I ran these numbers. That's $180 a month, and so to me, if I buy a year, right? A year. So to me, if I buy 2 Ubisoft games a year and I buy their season passes, that hits the value mark for me, right? That's 100. That's normally would be $200. By the way, the cost of season passes I've noticed for Ubisoft games is creeping up. I want to say, there's a $100 package for Ghost Recon, but like what used to be a $100 package is now the $120 package. So again, this might be a better value.
With the Division, you could get like a $100 and $120 or $130 package as well. So yeah, I think you're right. If that's the math, and they don't do any type of discount for an annual pass, if you're a player who invests in 2 games, from Ubi, it's not a bad price, right? It's right. The same math I did with like EA Origin Premier, where if I invest in 2 games from EA, it's not bad. But I think you've got to decide if that's where you're spending your gaming dollars. So just got a note from Prime, and he's lost his internet connection. So we'll see if he comes back. We've had all kinds of issues tonight, haven't we, gentlemen?
Right. And then one of those precious leaked games that Prime mentioned, Roller Champions, was kind of sort of shadow dropped. It is in beta. Well, not beta, but it's available. It was available to play during E3 if you went and signed up.
It's a pre-alpha.
Pre-alpha, yeah.
Yep, I played a couple of rounds. Fun, actually. It was, the cartoony piece of it made it pretty enjoyable. The speed controls pretty well for a pre-alpha. Kind of bare bones at this point, but in terms of the gameplay, I could see where, just like Rocket League, where I could see where it could hook people.
Yeah, I guess what I was confused about is what the heck is a pre-alpha? Like, these are the things that you guys mentioned, a lot of things that bothered you on Tuesday night. This is a thing that bothers me. Like, all these goofy early access things that we call different things but aren't the same thing. Now we're letting people have access to games in a pre-alpha. I don't know. The industry needs to settle that up, I think. And then the final thing, which was, again, our industry interesting in terms of us being students of the industry, Gods and Monsters from the Assassin's Creed team that put together Assassin's Creed Odyssey drops February 25th, 2020. It is very Zelda-like in appearance and focuses on ancient mythologies. But that team wanted to do something that kind of covered content that was similar, but again, wasn't. What they commented on is how to put the Assassin's Creed games together. There is this rigorous deep dive study of ancient history in an attempt to accurately replicate what those things looked like. And it sounded like, well, we kind of wanted to play in an ancient world, but actually have fun while we were developing it. So Gods and Monsters. I think will be an interesting thing for people who are fans of Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see some gameplay here. I know that some Game Press got a chance to see demos of it, but I haven't had a chance to see any video of what that looks like. I've spent 115 hours in Odyssey, so I'm definitely down for what this developer can do. So we'll see. I'm curious now at this point. I think that was another surprise to me and another new IP that piqued my interest.
So I'm going to skip AMD. Basically, the gist of it is AMD has new processors and a new video card dropping on the 7th of July. If you're a big PC gamer and you're tracking hardware, go take a look at that stuff. It has the potential to be interesting and potentially disruptive at certain price points. And so it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. I have an upgrade coming up in December. And so it's just interesting that new silicon will be on the market and available for consideration. On to Square Enix. What do you guys want to talk about with regards to the Final Fantasy VII Remake, which drops on the 3rd of March, 2020?
You want to go first, DB?
I'll just say, like Death Stranding, here's another game that I thought was not going to come out this console generation, or at least this fiscal year. And here we are. I am wrong again that this is a game, at least part one of, as they've said, they're not even sure how many parts they're going to make, because all the action takes place on Midgar, so it's early in the actual game. But part one is only going to take place in Midgard.
This comes on 2 Blu-ray discs. And the other thing, just before I turn it back to you guys to talk about Final Fantasy VII, I was also highly surprised that this was an actual press conference. I thought that Square Enix was just going to have a sizzle reel of Trailer Palooza again this year. So a bit of a turning of the shrew for Square Enix. Swiss, what did you want to mention about Final Fantasy VII?
First, I was like DB, and I didn't really think it was near on the horizon. And what I had heard made me skeptical. Up until now, we've seen some like nice CG stuff, so it wasn't enough to really excite me. And then I had heard in an article, I think on usgamer.net, that they were getting rid of the active time battle system for an action battle system. Which concerned me because all the more action-y Final Fantasies have been the ones that I've liked the least, I guess you could say. And I didn't really want them to mess with the formula too much, but they had a nice long sequence where they were describing the battle system. Like you said, it was more of a press conference where they were actually had a person up there describing what you were seeing. And, so there's definitely like action sequence in there, but then you're using that to build your active time battle gauge, and they have like a nice almost pause mode, I forget what they called it, action mode, where you can tactically choose your specials essentially that you've built up through the action sequences. So it actually looked to me really cool, and I'm actually excited about the game coming out now. And I didn't expect, I actually missed this part of the press conference. I pretty much jumped in right at Life is Strange 2, which you're probably going to talk about next. And so I wasn't really that excited to even go back and watch. I'm like, yeah, I want to go back and watch a bunch of trailers for like CGI, like pre-rendered CGI. And so today when I watched it, I was wow, I actually want Final Fantasy VII when it comes out.
I figured that game would kind of hit you guys right in the feels.
Real quick, one other
Yeah,
interesting note.
Yep.
Okay, so March 3rd, 2020. I'm gonna get some really nerd here, but in Japan, March 3rd is Hina Matsuri, which is the doll festival. It's actually a holiday in Japan, Girls' Day, and they dress dolls up and they put them out, and it's kind of little girls get presents and whatnot. But I just thought it was interesting. In Japan, the odd numbered months, like the day and the month when they match. So January 1st, March 3rd, May 5th, July 7th. Those are all like special days on the Japanese calendar, like more auspicious days. And I was like, oh, wow, I wonder if they picked that intentionally.
Pretty cool. Life is Strange 2 did shadow drop the day of their press conference. By the way, Square Enix and Nintendo, this year's E3 awards for number of shadow drops. It was like, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think there's been some of Life is Strange out already.
Well, there was the Captain thing in between thing that's been out.
But I think there was a first episode of Life is Strange 2.
Okay.
But maybe I think the shadow drop is that the next ones are coming now. So
okay. Octopath on PC, and that is a game that was released just prior to E3. Swiss, you were going to mention something about this?
I really like Octopath Traveler, so if you didn't pick it up on Switch and you want it on Steam, I would suggest picking it up. My other comment on this was I was disappointed that we didn't see anything else in that vein really from Square during the press conference, other than, oh, hey, we have this game and it's on Steam. I would have thought, given the success, we might have seen something, but maybe it's too soon to really build on that.
Okay. The Last Remnant Remastered, which was taken down off the Steam store last year, I think, and we thought would be locked away in a vault forever, now has been like that thing. I don't know there's got to be some type of dramatic story behind that thing. Go ahead, DBQ.
Yeah, well, in December they did a PS4 remaster that came out digital only, and part of it was, this was a 360 exclusive from Square. So, yes, and now it's coming to Switch, or it's out already, right? Another shadow drop.
Okay, well, Prime is trying to rejoin the call. I'm amazed that he didn't mark up that he had something to say about Dragon Quest Builders 2, which comes out July 12th. And has a demo available on the PlayStation Store on June 27th. A thing that caught my eye, Circuit Superstars in 2020, which is kind of a mini tabletop RC racer kind of game. The type of game that's been highly popular on mobile. I didn't touch what systems this is coming out on. I started to get really excited about the notion of Square Enix putting out a racing game, and then I saw that it was the tabletop RC racer, and I tamped that down a bit. But it's still interesting that it's just a genre that they haven't done before. Go ahead, DBQ.
I think I saw PC, PS4, and Switch.
But not Xbox.
That's what I remember seeing. So now
Okay.
now I'll check as we rejoin Prime here.
Probably the most interesting thing is the Battalion 1944, which again was announced as being available now on Steam. So not positive if that was a shadow drop or was something that was up on Steam before that they were just mentioning. Prime, is this a game that you've played at all?
No. Battalion
1944.
No, I have not.
So it's been out in early access.
Okay.
Yep.
I was just interested, not interested. It kind of piqued my interest, I should say, because of first person shooter and from Square. I was like, oh, okay. It's kind of
just a weird game for them to put out.
Yeah, and it looks, the graphics were fine, I guess. I mean, it looked a little, but I guess it's early access, so.
Right.
Fact checking Circuit Superstars is all four. So it's Switch, PS4, Xbox One, and Steam.
Okay, definitely a game which would play very well on the Switch on the go. An announcement that Square Music is out on streaming services. I noted that included Spotify and Amazon Music, but did not include Google Play. So just heads up there. And then all of you guys want to talk about the Avengers. So Prime, why don't we let you go ahead and start, since you missed some airtime while you were rebooting there.
Yeah. We finally got the big reveal. Looks good, I guess. I mean, they didn't really show anything, at least during the press conference. I don't know. I think they had some behind the doors kind of gameplay and stuff like that. I don't know if they ever really showed anything. And from what just few articles I read, a couple were they never had anything in the article as far as like a trailer or gameplay or anything. They were just kind of talked about it. So I was like, okay. But I mean, just as far as, I don't know, I guess it looked all right. I mean, even this, I think that was in-game footage. I believe it said like at the beginning before they started the trailer. I mean, it looks good, but I mean, it doesn't look great to me. Not that the graphics are, you know, super important. It kind of looked like during that trailer they kind of zoomed into gameplay for like a second or two, and they kind of went back out of it. At least that was my impression. But I don't know. Story-wise, it looked like it might be kind of interesting. You know, some things happen. I'm not going to spoil it, I guess. You know, who cares? But you know, they kind of jump into the future, almost kind of like an endgame-ish kind of a thing. Like, it doesn't follow the movie or anything or any of the movies, as far as I know. It's an original story. So I don't know. I'm still excited for it, but I mean, it just didn't wow me like I thought it was going.
And then, Swiss, did you have something else you wanted to mention?
It also did not wow me. I didn't understand why they didn't show any gameplay. Like I didn't even know what kind of game it was. So it was they had it up there. I read an article I think today, and one of the first things they said was a QuickTime event, which continued to dampen my enthusiasm.
Yeah, it didn't look any better to me than DC Universe Online, and it's to occupy my time. It's unfortunately a game that's built like this. It has to be pretty remarkable. DBQ?
No, just from what they said, they talked about it as a live service game, right? They talked about it as expanding missions and content. So they've hinted at some of that, but again, not a whole lot here.
Like some other things you guys mentioned, this game left me with more questions than it provided answers. On to Nintendo. Prime, I'll let you start. Witcher 3, Wild Hunt.
Yeah, so coming out this year. I don't think there was an exact date. I think they just said fall or winter or something like that. But
2019, which every year in the past since the Switch came out has always meant holiday season 2019 at this point.
Yeah, I was just like, I know it was kind of rumored, you know, beforehand that, you know, I think, I don't know, some, you know, European or something site might have leaked it or something, had it on their site. I don't know if it was Amazon or whatever source. And then finally, you know, we get the announcement. I was kind of pretty surprised actually, because it's pretty graphic intensive. I mean, even on the Xbox, it looked really good, but I mean, I don't Xbox One, and it's been on PC and, you know, PS4 and all that, but I'm not sure how. I know they gave out the specs of it's going to run, I think, what, 720 on docked?
720 docked and 540 docked.
Yeah. A handheld, you mean? 540 handheld?
Yeah, if I said that wrong. Yeah, 540 handheld, 720 docked. Sorry.
720 docked. So, I mean, docked, okay, it should look fairly good, but I mean, I guess handheld should be all right, I suppose, just because, you know, it's a smaller screen and, you know, I guess they can do some tricks or whatever. But well, we'll just have to see. But I'm excited for it. I'm glad they're bringing it over. It was just kind of a surprise-ish for me.
So you want to talk about Fire Emblem Three Houses?
Yeah, it excited my inner anime nerd. So, and I've always liked Fire Emblem, so I'm still pretty psyched about this one. We got a little bit more story aspect to it, and the first time the direct came and they gave some story details, like I think I saw somebody describe it as like Harry Potter with like the different schools, and this one really brought home more of like the contention that would be there. So it didn't seem like there would be that much conflict, the first story, and this kind of shed some light on that. But I'm pretty excited about the game.
Well, I am playing a tactical RPG that is kind of has a JRPG presentation style, so I am probably in on Fire Emblem Three Houses. I am out on Witcher 3 Wild Hunt on Switch. Resident Evil 5 and 6 also coming to Switch in fall of 2019. Prime, you want to talk about No More Heroes 3 coming out in 2020?
Yeah, that was a total surprise to me. I didn't know if they were even going to make another one of these. I mean, they had that kind of smaller game. It was more of I guess kind of a bunch of mini games. I don't even say mini games, but like different style of games, but more of not like a 3D action game like the first two were. So it was a cool video that they showed, and it was just, you know, CGI or animation that they were showing. They look cool, but we'll have to see what comes of it when it comes out next year. But I'm excited for it. I like the first two.
Contra Anniversary Collection was available as of that press conference, and then another. You can call it a sequel in the Contra series is coming out thereafter. I've heard mixed takes on Contra Anniversary Collection. I've heard that it's really good for those people who are super nostalgic about it. Then I've heard from other people it's not great. DBQ, well, and that takes us to DBQ, who wanted to specifically talk about that sequel, Contra Rogue Corp, coming out September of 2019.
Yeah, I guess I'll just say I could tell that it was a Contra game, but I'm really curious on what this actually looks like. And man, does it look like it looks like a Earth Defense Force. I mean, it's got that kind of early 360-ish type of graphics to it. So I'll be curious to see if it comes out at a budget price or if this comes out at a full price and what that looks like.
Was this one? It was more like an isometric view. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, almost plays out like some of the PlayStation 2 versions of Contra, where it's kind of a top-down or isometric, kind of twin-stick shootery.
Okay, and then Nintendo talked about Daemon X Machina, which we saw this game in. It was just kind of a sizzle teaser trailer piece in the Nintendo Direct from last year. Now we have it dated for release on September 13th of 2019. Prime, you had some additional things you wanted to mention about this title?
Yeah, they did have a demo out for it at one point. I think it was last year. It came out right after E3 or so. I only got to play a little bit of it. It seemed cool at the time, but seeing this trailer now more, it just gets me more excited for this game. Just all the action and all these big mechs and all this other kind of stuff that I haven't really seen on at least on the Switch. So I'm excited for it. I'm really looking forward to this game.
I am excited and looking forward to it as well. Swiss, your eye was then caught by Panzer Dragoon, which drops this winter.
Yeah, they're remaking it for the Switch, and partly because it's always been a game that I kind of know about the series, but I never had Segas growing up, so I've never played any of them. So this is one of those cases where I'm gonna have the opportunity to kind of not have to kind of go back and play it on an emulator or an old collection, but get a fresh experience with I think a classic game. I get the sense that people like them.
Yeah, to me it was a groundbreaking game. Just in terms of its presentation, it was the first time that a game really had been presented in 3D, in that near first-person kind of aspect, over the shoulder, on rails, driving forward. It was a 32-bit game, just to convey a story of its impact. I think some of you guys have heard this before. This is the release title that I bought with my Sega Saturn when I just went up and picked it up out of the blue, shortly after it dropped in March of whatever the year that was. Brought the system home, booted up. I get a lot of flashy graphics from the intro scene from the Sega Saturn, and then I popped this game in. I literally sat there in awe. I shut down my Sega Saturn, stopped what I was doing, called my brother, and said, dude, 32-bit graphics make 16-bit graphics look like Pong. And then he and I talked for an hour about the notion of this new era of gaming we were in. And then I got off the phone and finally went and actually played the game on my Sega Saturn. So it was a pretty impactful game for me. And yeah, I think it's very cool that now this whole new generation of gamers is going to get an opportunity to experience it. I hope that it plays well. I hope it's not one of these things that was a classic because of the time that we lived in, that now will feel very antiquated. But it'll be interesting to see how it does. Go ahead, Swiss.
I was just gonna say your comments made me want to try it even more, so that's cool.
And then Prime, you wanted to talk about Astro Chain, which drops this year on August 30th, 2019.
Yeah. So before I talk about this is how you were talking about there's nothing really coming up, coming up soon, but actually we talked about that last time, but we didn't get to talk about Nintendo because Nintendo has a lot of stuff coming out within the next 6 months. So I'm kind of glad we saw that reversal from all this. Here's all the stuff for next year. And yeah, like I said, there's some other stuff coming out, but Nintendo is really bringing out like a ton of stuff coming out. But yeah, Astral Train is my like Swiss said, his Fire Emblem with his anime nerd game, but this one is kind of mine. It looks crazy, it's from Platinum, so you got guys like sliding and flying all over the screen and stuff. So you got mechs and you got like demons or ghosts or these things are fighting. So yeah, this looks really cool. I can't wait for this one to come out and not too far away. So hopefully it'll be as good as I think it's going to be. Swiss.
I agree with everything Prime said.
Hopefully this is good Platinum and not Ninja Turtles and Transformers Platinum.
And then the game, which admittedly has more of my interest and has captured more of my curiosity than Avengers did, Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, The Black Order, which has a different presentation style, and a near kind of cell-shaded kind of presentation. Drops July 19th, 2019. So again, it is very near. This, as far as I understand, I believe is a Switch exclusive, or Nintendo exclusive. There will be, excuse me, follow-on expansion packs this year, starting with Marvel Knights, and then followed up by X-Men and Fantastic Four. I don't know that all those are being delivered this year. I believe at least the first of those drop this year. This is where I'm going to be doing my comic book playing, gentlemen, and I could kind of care less about the Avengers because it's just not striking. Unless they figure out a better way to message what that thing is, it's unclear to me how that game's going to work, and I'm not willing to put that time into it. This game has all the classic Marvel teams, character progression, tons of different costumes. I can clearly tell what this game is and how it's going to be put together and how it's going to present its storyline. It's you versus the Black Order. I can't imagine a cleaner thing to convey to fans. Prime, you were going to mention some things about this as well.
No, yeah, I'm really excited about this one too. I played the first two, beat the first one. I don't think I ever beat the second one, but. Yeah, I'm just excited, and these expansion packs too. X-Men, Fantastic Four, that's cool. But Marvel Knights, I'm hoping they showed Ghost Rider at one point, I was like, ooh, that's pretty cool because you don't see Ghost Rider a lot in video games. I think he was in the last Marvel versus fighting game. But yeah, it just looks awesome. Team Ninja's doing this, so I'm not sure because the way these games play out, they've never really done a game like this. I don't think it's not a ninja flipping around and doing action adventure stuff. It's more grounded, more kind of RPG-ish. You can pick up stuff, kind of like I guess like shoot, what do you call it, Diablo, where you're picking up different kind of equipment and hooking it onto yourself and stuff like that. But hopefully it'll look good. It looks good, but it didn't look great to me. And I know this is the Switch, but I don't know, it looked kind of off for some reason when I was watching the video, and maybe it was just the stream I was watching at the time. But
because you were looking at it in full screen, and you're used to looking at the Switch on the little teeny tiny.
That's true. So hopefully it does look better in handheld. But I'll play it. Regardless, I'll play it. Just because it does. Like you said, it scratches that comic book nerdery.
Then we're getting.
Can we go back and hit Empire of the Sun just for the sake of?
Oh, sure.
It's kind of
Empire of Sin.
Empire of Sin, right?
I made the same thing too. The thing came up on the screen. I'm like, oh, Empire of the Sun? Isn't that like a existential movie or something?
Steven Spielberg, yeah. No, right. So Empire of Sin, it's Paradox and John Romero. Nice pedigree here and kind of a full-on strategy game. It's got. It sounded like from the description, has some kind of frozen synapse kind of DNA in it in terms of some of the grid-based strategy pieces to it. But again, not one that I knew anything about or even knew that it existed, but the strategy and the kind of gangster prohibition era setting definitely has my interest.
Yeah, I guess that kind of threw me with I didn't realize it was going to be that like grid gameplay at first, and I thought it was just isometric. All right, you're gonna shoot people and do this, but yeah, it was interesting that it's gonna be like that. So we'll see.
Did either one of you catch? Is this turn based or is it like a real time, almost kind of bullet hell twin stick shooter kind of thing? Or
From what I've read, it reads as turn based. I don't know that I've heard any. I mean, because of the grid base, because of kind of the frozen synapse, the paradox piece, it all kind of almost. Nobody's used the word 4x, 4x, but it feels in that type of, that there is much more about. There's economics in here. There's economies. There's kind of an influence factor of your how aggressive you are, or how volatile you are as a character, your retribution. So there's a number of systems going on in the background, in addition to kind of the map zone resource aspects there. So it definitely seems right in that kind of turn-based strategy zone.
okay, well, hopefully this will not be another Daikatana. In November, we were getting Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games. And then finally, probably the biggest thing that it was. Maybe there's an argument that it was the biggest announcement. The thing at the press conference at the Nintendo Direct, it was definitely probably the biggest surprise. Maybe, but you would think that they would. But again, it didn't. It wasn't huge for me because there was no release date attached to it. So it's just like, I would expect that they were working on a sequel to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. But that was announced at the press conference that a proper sequel to The Legend of Zelda is in development. I've seen speculation that it is going to be in the vein of Majora's Mask, which I think trues up with kind of the visual presentation style that the trailer had. I'm not sure. Swiss.
Why they bring up Majora's Mask is because there aren't really many direct sequels in Zelda, and Majora's Mask was a direct sequel to Ocarina of Time. And the other thing that I think of note, and why people would make that connection, is Majora's Mask is a little bit darker for a Zelda game. Definitely darker than Ocarina, and this little snippet, cutscene, what have you, is kind of creepy as far as Zelda is concerned. I mean, it wasn't, Ghostwire Tokyo creepy, but it was Zelda creepy. So, I'm just, it's nice to know that there. I know you said there's no release date attached to it, but as we look at the next round of their top tier franchises, now we know what which game is probably going to be coming down the chute. So we have the Legend of Zelda sequel now. I assume there's going to be a Mario Odyssey 2 of some fashion, and we're still waiting on Metroid Prime 4, which they had to basically restart. So now we know, okay, the next one to look for, I guess, is Zelda.
All right, gentlemen, any other things that you want to cover before we wrap up E3 coverage for this year?
I guess just on Legend of Zelda 2 or Breath of the Wild 2, I guess some other speculation that I've seen is it might be a co-op game because they showed Zelda and Link sitting there at the end, or possibly some kind of like Ico type of game where she's kind of following you around or something like that. So I thought that was kind of interesting that it might be either of those two types of games.
I'll say I'm going to hit the other Zelda game, or the other two Zelda games, and talk about the Hyrule Crypt of the Necrodancer game that dropped today, right? That is another Zelda rhythm game. And then Link's Awakening, which looked neat. I was really excited about it. And now to have the ability to build some dungeons in it as well, I'll be really curious to see what that looks like. And it's another September game. So there's a lot of those out there on my radar.
And just one more thing real quick. I did like the fake out for the Smash reveal of Banjo that they did. I thought it was pretty funny how they had the Duck Hunt dog and the one of the ducks just kind of sitting there in the silhouette looking like Banjo and Kazooie, and then they're just all kind of fooling around, and then the real Banjo and Kazooie come down and stomps on them. So I thought that was good.
I thought it was a nice touch that they used Donkey Kong as the scene, because Donkey Kong Country was a classic Rare game, as is Banjo Kazooie.
And no Animal Crossing until next year. I'm sad.
All right. Anything else that we need to cover for this year's E3? All right. Well, thanks so much for all the listeners and viewers out there who stuck with us through these 2 extended episodes. 2 hours the first night, an hour and a half tonight. It's all downhill from here for the remainder of 2019. It's nothing to do but sit around and wait for games to drop, and then for us to talk about them. Of course, we claimed last year, after E3, the news cycle will be less busy. That proved to not be the case. So between playing games and covering the news cycle, we're pretty much going to be hopping. Thanks so much for joining in on tonight's episode. Once again, my name has been Agaskali Stamus from the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube, as well as the Rounding Off Infinity gaming channel on YouTube. My co-hosts tonight have been Osiris Prime, DBQ, Hams, and Swiss Guard. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for sticking with and getting through this week. I know that it was close to 12 hours of press conferences to view, review, make notes about, and be prepared to come in and have a discussion on them. So I appreciate your service, as always. With that, on behalf of the E2KG Network, that's going to do it for us. Until next time, happy hunting, stay safe out there, play the games that you like, and pay for the games that you love. I guess I got to come up with another different ending for the podcast. Thanks so much for joining in. That's going to do it for us for tonight. We will be back here next week at our regularly scheduled time on Tuesday nights at 9:15 p.m. Eastern. Next week is a GX episode, so DBQ, Prime, and Swiss will be on to talk about all the games that they've been playing, and potentially a Picks Plays assignment, either a previously assigned one or the next one that they're going to queue up for discussion at a later GX show episode. So until then, we will talk to you guys later. Good night, good luck, and good gaming.